course, right when you go live, Lunas goes live also.
Of course. This Hangout is now live. So, hello everybody and welcome back. This is the 2015 Oscar Marathon Update 2. Where I'm Christiana and Mike.
To be here at 9 Eastern, it is once again my fault. And I make a commitment to get better, or Chris can just not invite me anymore, or just start without me.
Well, that is potentially something I could do. I could start the broadcast at the time and then just kind of wing it until we get the official thing started. But I don't know. I think it works out okay. If anyone listening actually has an opinion.
That might be a good way to convince me to start doing it, because if I'm just leaving you hanging, talking by yourself, then maybe I'll actually prioritize being here on time.
Well, maybe we'll try that for future episodes. So in any case, tonight we're going to just talk about movies we've seen since the last update, but it looks like neither of us has been super successful. Well, no, in fact, actually, I think it's going to work out okay, because I haven't seen that many movies yet either, and I prioritized the ones that you had seen already that I had not, so at the very least we can talk about those, including Gone Girl and How to Train Your Dragon 2.
Good.
So we can talk in detail about those. I did also see the Box Trolls, so I can talk about that briefly.
Yeah. I'm curious about that one.
Yeah. Well, so maybe we can just go ahead and start there. In particular, since I think we'll probably want to get into spoilers in our discussion of both Gone Girl and How to Train Your Dragon 2, just because I think in order to really discuss the most interesting things about those movies, you kind of need to be able to get into spoilers.
Yes.
So we'll start then with the Box Trolls. I won't spend too much time on it. But this is the latest movie from Laika, which is the company that does these stop-motion animated films. For example, Paranorman was their most recent one. They did Coraline. And so this is their latest of that type. It is nominated for Best Animated Feature. And what I can say about it primarily is that it is just super charming. It's very sweet. Just a second. Lena, come on. Sorry about that. So it's definitely, in terms of the audience, it is much more targeted at kids than even some of the others that aren't in that category. Certainly, when we talk about animated movies anymore, lots of times what we're discussing is the difference between a movie that is really mostly for kids and the ones that are really intended to be, for the whole family, in the sense that it's as much for the adults as for the kids, right?
Right.
This one is more for the kids. The story has got lots of neat little details in it, but overall it's pretty simple. There's no really nuanced, complex lessons going on. It's pretty straightforward in terms of the actual story. It feels like it's written from a children's book, which I believe it actually is. The basic premise is that we've got this sort of fantasy city called Cheesebridge. There's a weird kind of food motif going throughout the whole movie, actually. I believe their neighboring nation is Czechoslovakia, which I thought was pretty funny. And so this town, we open with a box troll, which is just a little monster creature that it wears like a box around its torso in a way that it can sort of duck down and hide in and look just like a old cardboard box. And all of the box trolls are like that. They're, various different shapes, but they just all fit into their various different boxes. And so we see a box troll sneaking into a house and then running away with a baby in its arms. And it's framed kind of like sinisterly. But then what we see next is this baby growing up with a loving parental type relationship with this particular box troll and involved in the community of all of these other box trolls that live beneath the city, and they kind of scavenge machinery and stuff from the world above, and they've got this whole elaborate little undercity. But what we also see is that in the city above, what everybody is hearing is that box trolls steal and eat babies, that they're basically monsters, they need to be exterminated. So there's definitely, we see that the box trolls are not like that, and yet the box trolls are being hunted and captured and dragged away under the presumption that they are monsters that eat babies. And in particular, there's one notable baby that everybody knows that a box troll stole it and hid it away, and nobody's ever seen it again because presumably it was eaten. Except we know that at least this one baby we've seen is, growing up just fine, thinking of himself as a box troll. And so the other notable character is the daughter of the leader of this city, kind of the mayor, that type of character. Although it's weird in the sense that the city doesn't seem to have any kind of a government as we would normally understand it. It seems more like it's run by like if you imagine like the Shriners were the ones that actually just decided what happens in a city. Like they're just in charge, but there's not any presumption of like it's an elected office or anything. It's really kind of a weird class system thing. They all have white hats. They're the white hat society. And in fact, the primary motivation of the bad guy is that he wants to be accepted into the upper crust of the city and get his own white hat. That's his motivation. But anyway, like almost all of that is, it's all very superficial stuff. Or not superficial, but it's simple. It's not a complex story. But what makes this movie really fun is just how visually imaginative it is, and just the charm and personality in the animation of all of these different characters. There's lots of fun voice actors, Nick Frost and Simon Pegg and Richard Ayoade. I think I'm pronouncing that right. He's from the IT Crowd TV show. And so there's lots of fun voice acting. Just little bits of silly business, like the little girl who is way too into these stories of the little monsters that eat babies. Like when she first meets up with the boy, I'm trying to remember. Oh, yeah, the boy's named Eggs because the box that they give him when he's a baby just has a label on it that says Eggs because it was an egg box, presumably, so his name is Eggs now. So she has seen him running around with the box trolls and assumed that they kidnapped him. And so she's demanding answers to her questions like, did they take you down to their underground lair? Did they eat your family? Did they let you watch? I mean, make you watch? And then when she eventually goes down to the lair too, she demands to be taken to see the mountains of bones and rivers of blood. And it's charming, is what it is. It's very slight. It's kind of a fairy tale style movie. It's more aimed at kids, but certainly on that level, it succeeds. I think it's a lot of fun. It's probably kids under 6. Parents might want to, know their own kid and how likely they are to get scared at various sort of surreal or, like if there's a bad guy who at one point it apparently has killed some of these box trolls, like how traumatic would that be to any particular kid, right? I think adults watching the movie know better than to think that's actually what's happening, but it's certainly what is presented to us as what's happening at the time. And so it's good. It's very sweet. I still feel like in terms of just my own personal preference, I like the Lego Movie better. But this one, watching this and watching How to Train Your Dragon 2 made me start thinking that maybe part of the rationale being used for why these movies were nominated and Lego Movie was not is really maybe just on the visual level, because as much as the Lego Movie's visual aesthetic is perfect for what it's doing, it's also not as stunningly beautiful as some of these other movies in terms of just what the animation looks like visually, right? It looks great because it looks like a bunch of imaginative Legos, and that's cool for what the movie is doing, but it's also, you might make the case that it's not as impressive an achievement from the animation perspective.
Yeah.
So I was, not that I have come around to thinking it didn't deserve the nomination, but it was more just maybe that was the thought process that led people to vote for some of these others over that one, just on the basis of the animation is more impressive. And certainly this one, being the stop motion, that's kind of a whole other order of magnitude in terms of what it takes. Because they have to design it all, but then also there's a great little shot in the credits where two of the characters get into a little bit of a philosophical debate about, what if this world is not all there is? What if there's these larger creatures that we aren't able to perceive that control all our movements? And as they're having this conversation, they start including frames in the footage of when the animator is in there moving them. So it shows them moving the way they would in full animation, but some of the frames they're choosing have the animator in it. So you see sort of this flickering effect of the animators moving their arms around as they gesture and stuff like that, and it's really pretty cool.
That is kind of cool.
Yeah. So Box Trolls is, like I said, it's not groundbreaking in the sense that it's not like a must-see, but it's very charming, and kind of like Paranorman before it, I feel like it's unfortunate in a way that they keep making movies that look weird in commercials, and therefore maybe people don't go to see them, but they end up actually being better than the commercials would make them look. At least that's my own reaction. I think both this one and Paranorman, I see the TV commercial and I'm like, oh, I don't know, that looks kind of weird. But then I see it and it's like, oh yeah, that's actually really nice. The things I like about it were not really very well conveyed in the commercial.
That's true. I mean, it didn't look that interesting to me in the commercial.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it's not a stunning, groundbreaking film of it's a heartbreaking work of staggering genius. It's like, but I liked it. I thought it was good. I think. See, it's hard to judge against, say, How to Train Your Dragon 2 or even Big Hero 6, just because its ambitions are so different. You know what I mean? Like, those are both trying to tell these sort of epic action-adventure, young adult, sci-fi fantasy, coming-of-age type stories, right? Whereas Box Trolls is, like, it's based on a kid's picture book, and it feels like that. And it's really good, but it's just trying to do such a different thing.
Right.
Yeah. So, in any case,
well, I feel
think.
better about it now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've like I said, I think had it been me to choose, I still probably would have voted for the Lego Movie to win, if it were me voting. But I think I've kind of come to peace with what I think probably happened there, and certainly don't think it's like some conspiracy to snub the Lego Movie. All right, so that and Gone Girl and How to Train Your Dragon 2 are really all I saw since our last update. Were you able to see any of them, or are we just down to those two?
Fortunately, we're just down to those two, and we can talk about this on another episode once everything's official. But I've had it looks like I'm going to be moving for a job, so it's taken a lot of my time, a lot of travel, and then when I do have free time, it's not that I have zero free time. It's been hard to get motivated to go through the steps that are required for this marathon. I want something a little less, like it's just something that takes less active, leisure.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm also trying to focus on making sure that with all the travel, that I'm still getting to the gym and stuff like that, and then you just end up not wanting to go track down a movie, and it sucks that I'm not able to participate fully this year, but at the same time, life happens, as they say.
Yeah, well, that's why we're not shooting for, it's not about the score. It's just about trying to see what we can see.
Yep.
Each time.
Yep. And either way, I consider this year a success, even if my score is not high, because I saw something I would never have seen, like Boyhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to make time to go see, some movies that I wanted to see, like American Sniper and things like that, maybe I would never have gotten over that. I'm interested in that, but, and this got me to do it. So it's a success from that experiment. Even if the score is going to be poor this year. So.
Well, even my score is going to be poor in comparison to previous years for me as well, just in the basis that I'm not seeing that many either, and part of that for me is that I'm involved in improv classes this year that I wasn't before, and just kind of connected with that. I've just got various other activities. I added kind of a semi-joking tweet earlier today, which was I have a lot more activities on my social calendar of late, which is really cutting into my TV and video game time.
Yeah, amazing how that works.
Yeah.
And I even noticed it's clear the movies that you did watch between last time and this time are some of the low-hanging fruit, basically. Like they're low effort to get, because you can just buy them online or whatever.
Box Trolls I got from the Red Box at the grocery store across the street. Gone Girl and How to Train Your Dragon 2. I did pay-per-view.
Yep. Which is much different than having to go to the theater and track down a movie when it's showing. And I can see you've also sort of taken the easy. So I'm not alone in that this year.
Well, I will also say that the weather in Boston for the last couple of weeks has made it even more difficult than usual to get out the door and go places.
True.
So I'll have that extra piece on my behalf. So I guess then Gone Girl and How to Train Your Dragon 2. Do you have a preference for which one you want to do first?
No, I obviously gave my little synopsis of each, but I think we can have a more interesting discussion now that you've seen them. So, I guess let's do How to Train Your Dragon on the heels of Box Trolls, since we're in the animation category.
Hold on just a second, Linda. Yeah, I'm bribing her with pieces of cracker. Stay. Okay, so what we will do again briefly is to say, this is spoiler warning. I fully intend that we will go ahead and talk about just about everything there is to talk about with How to Train Your Dragon 2. Even in our previous discussion, you mentioned some story spoilers, but I want to just go ahead and get fully into it this time. So just anyone who might be listening, if you are still wanting to see it and feeling like you don't want to be spoiled, maybe skip ahead. I think if you're watching this live, I'm not sure what to tell you, but if you are listening back, I will put in the podcast notes the time at which we shift to the other movie, which is Gone Girl, but of course we're going to do the same thing for that one and also talk about spoilers. So, with spoilers adequately warned, How to Train Your Dragon 2. So you kind of already covered it, although I feel like you left a lot of opinion hanging because what you actually said is that it's sort of hard to get into it without talking about the spoilers. And I think I can imagine now why that is, which is just that plot developments that happen play a big role in how I feel about the movie.
Yeah. It's the whole movie is, because you go into it, and I think I kind of described this, it's like with a what's next, and you told me, well, obviously there's enough story because of the number of books and all that, but I didn't know that. So I entered the movie with, okay, they train the dragons, what could possibly happen next? And they found some very interesting devices of, and plot lines to make it very interesting what happened next.
I will say I haven't read any of the books, and so even though I'm aware of their existence, and that they start with the dragons already trained, or at least already, Berk is already a city of dragon riders. I don't know the actual plots of any of the other books, so I have no idea if the story in this sequel movie has even anything to do with the plots of any of the books. I would imagine they probably have some overlap, but I think that there is a lot to like about this movie, but overall I was left feeling kind of unsatisfied. And unsatisfied specifically for story reasons, because I think that while on a scene-by-scene basis, like there wasn't like any moments that stood out where I said, oh, I don't like that, or something like that, but overall it just kind of felt incoherent. What it felt like to me is that they had like 5 different versions of the story storyboarded, and then the final script is kind of a mishmash of all of them. So it's having a bunch of stuff happens, but I'm left at the end feeling like I'm not sure what the movie's trying to tell me.
Right. And I had that feeling along with wow, I'm actually impressed that there's all this story that they came up with when I thought the story was done, so I was satisfied that precursor that I went in with was gone.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. When you really step back and think about all the things that happen, it's just a lot of things happening.
Yeah. So, for example, one of the big plot developments is that he discovers his mother is not actually dead, but has actually been living by herself, studying dragons all this time. But see, it's a perfect example of something that works in the moment, but then when you think back about it, we have to say, so she's really been all by herself studying dragons for 20 years, because we're told that Hiccup is around that age, I think, this time, right?
Yeah.
So all by herself. So it's one thing to say that, and as she does, that she feels like dragons are worthy of study. We want to learn more about them, and she has given up that anyone in Berk will ever be willing to listen. And so when she discovers that Hiccup has actually convinced them, she realizes that she maybe made a mistake staying away all this time. And so like that works in the moment, but what I'm also just thinking is like, so she's studying dragons by herself for 20 years with apparently no plans to ever tell anyone else about it? Like what benefit is that? Like if she went to go try to find some other place to tell them about how great dragons are, that would be one thing. But when she's just off studying them by herself, I feel like there's another emotional beat there that we didn't get. Like there has to be more to it for her to have ended up spending 20 years all by herself.
Yeah.
She did not try to go convince other people, and especially there's, it would be one thing if there was an implication that the argument about what to do with dragons between her and Stoic Hiccup's father, if the argument with them had gotten really heated and angry, and so maybe there was an element of that to it too, but we're not given that impression. I mean, they kind of give like they kind of they say that she had tried to convince them and couldn't, but we don't see them yelling at each other or anything.
No.
And in fact, when Stoic sees her alive again, like there's immediately like 100% forgiveness, no even discussion about it, which makes for a nice awe moment, but also feels a little bit like,
you left me for 20 years to hang out with dragons.
You made me think you were dead
Yeah.
for 20 years.
Yeah.
And you never came to even just check in? Like, I mean, you know, we thought that you were wrong about dragons because we saw no evidence that they were trainable or friendly in any way. So this point where you've discovered that they are and you can ride them around and jump from one to the other while they're flying and all of that, you couldn't have just come and done a demo to say, see, told you, but no, you just stayed away all this time. Like, so I feel like there's a few extra steps that I don't blame the movie exactly for not taking them, because it would get complex and messy, and the movie doesn't have time for that because it has to move on to being half-assed about all these other story points. And you know, so I'm focusing on the nitpicks and the critical stuff here because, like, that's what stood out to me. I mean, let me again just say for the moment. First of all, the movie is gorgeous, and it was watching this movie that is part of what brought me to what I was saying earlier. That maybe that's a part of why maybe it got nominated instead of Lego Movies, because it's beautiful. You know, just some of the shots of, you know, them just being up on a cliff and looking down over the ocean and the clouds and the sunset, and it's amazing. It's really pretty. So that has a lot going for it. And then I'll even also say that just like the writing and the action and choreography and just the presentation of each moment in the movie as it happens, I think really tends to work. And it's really the only just that the story, once you kind of try to add it all together and get a whole, that it kind of falls apart a little bit. Feels kind of mushed together instead of like a whole story. And another key example of that is the villain. So, what's this guy's deal? Do you even remember? Yeah, why?
To get them.
Yeah. Because there's one moment where we finally hear from him, and he spins Hiccup this sob story about, he shows, they took my arm, they burned my whole family, and I need dragons to fight dragons. And then Hiccup kind of goes, really? Because I think you need dragons to fight people. And the guy kind of winks at him like, yeah, you knew it, I'm full of it. All right, we're done talking about that now. I don't have there's no need for me to provide any further motivation for anything I do. I'm going to swirl my stick around and yell 3 times, because that's apparently what makes an alpha dragon follow me despite me being a crazy person. Like, so why did that happen? Why does he have an alpha dragon doing anything he says? Well, where does that come from? There's no explanation of that at all.
No.
And then there's the messiness of this whole theme of it is better to earn a dragon's loyalty than to dominate its will by force. And to prove that, we're going to dominate you by force. We're going to have Toothless challenge your alpha dragon and become the new alpha dragon, and then have all the other dragons shoot fire at you until you go away. So I just feel like it's got a lot of great moments in it, and it's certainly sad when, you know, as you mentioned last time, the beat when Hiccup's father is killed saving him, and like it's kind of horrifying and traumatic when this other alpha dragon can actually control Toothless to an extent, and like that's awful, but it also just feels like, you know, not that everything that happens has to have some real-life parallel that you can learn a lesson from the movie on. You know, I mean, sometimes you can tell just a fantasy story where things happen related to that. It doesn't all have to have some metaphorical parallel. But I don't know. I just sort of that's another example of me feeling like I don't know what the movie is trying to tell me about this. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, the other Alpha Dragon's power works when it's important for us to be in a dark moment of the story, but then we can talk him out of it when we need to.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, hey, Toothless, I'm so glad I was able to break that spell. I wish I could have done that before you killed my dad. And then, of course, one of the things that I referenced without knowing really the details about it is that I had read an article talking about Hiccup's mom as an example of the Trinity problem. And having seen it, I definitely see that too. It's not quite the same as, you know, Trinity in the sense of not following quite the same beats, in that she doesn't actually end up teaching Hiccup really anything except just showing him around her ice cave. But just she's shown as being super badass in terms of being able to fight and fly around on the dragons. She knows what she's doing. She's a good fighter. But then she kind of, as that we get to that sequence where the ice cave is being attacked by the bad guys, she doesn't do anything else in the story after that. She's just kind of hanging out. She gets to be sad when Stoic dies. And, you know, we have a lot of other characters, too, that really aren't given very much to do. You know, we have sort of a mini arc for this other dragon trapper. And I can't help but wonder at the end, like, well, what happened to the rest of his crew? What happened to the apparently 5,000 plus people following the bad guy? You know, I mean, presumably once Toothless could control all the dragons, they were scared enough to leave instead of stay fighting, but where are they going? So I think there's a lot to like about the movie, and I think had I seen it in a different context, a lot of these things wouldn't bother me as much. But I do think I went into it with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. You know, just in the sense of, okay, well, I really liked Lego Movie and that didn't get nominated, but this did better impress me. You know, that sort of attitude.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why I like the movie better than you, because what happened to me is I went with that same chip, but it was all based on what could they even possibly do? Like, they're going to have to invent some mechanism just to make the story interesting. Like, they've already done the interesting part, which was train the dragons, which is the name of the story. So it better be something really cool, or I'm going to be really mad that Lego Movie didn't. And it didn't do anything really cool, but it at least had a story that didn't feel forced, and it was entertaining enough that I was like, wow, okay, that was better than I expected. So I was less critical of all those things where everything you're saying is dead on. And I'm kind of laughing to myself as like, wow, you know, why didn't I get so outraged about that? Because that is pretty egregious that they left all those things hanging. But like you said, it has to do with the mindset you go into it with. And I went into it also expecting it to be bad, and it was better than I thought. So I left saying, you know what, I enjoyed myself. And and I'm sitting here listening. I'm like, yeah, that is true. That just doesn't make any sense. You know, well, yeah, that's true. They probably should have talked a little bit more about that thing, you know, or whatever, with everything you said. So, you know, now I'm outraged.
Well, one thing that I will say, just to have a little bit of a different perspective here, is that after watching it, I tweeted that, let's see, oh, you know what, I wasn't even tweeting about this directly. I was reminded of The Road to El Dorado in a different conversation, and so I just posted a tweet to say, just because not enough people know this, the DreamWorks film The Road to El Dorado is one of my favorite things. But maybe just because of the DreamWorks connection, Jeff Height on Twitter tweeted saying, "My kids have been watching it lately. It's pretty darn good, but for sheer power, How to Train Your Dragon 2 is it for me." And so on that basis, we engaged in a fairly lengthy, for Twitter, conversation where basically he's defending it, and I'm not attacking it so much as I'm saying there are parts of it that didn't work for me, so you tell me why it worked so well for you. And so what he, so I said that, it didn't really work for me, and he's saying, really, I thought it was some of their best storytelling. Sure, the message was not so much in your face as others, but I thought for sheer storytelling was their best work. I'd be interested in what left you feeling that way. I kind of explained a little bit. So he's saying, I thought the message was pretty clear, just not as in your face. And what I said is, can you explain the message of this movie in a sentence? And he spent the next 4 or 5 tweets trying to come up with various different wordings of it, which included figuring out who we are as a young adult within the confines of our environment and how that measures to people's expectations, maybe growing into ourselves and into our parents, which we all do even if we don't want to. And he says, oh, I have it, turning into our own version of our parents even if we swear we never will. We're finding the strength to do what society demands of us and doing it our own way. There, I think that last one nails it. And so he's kind of moving around that, and it's like I see where that I can totally get his thought process, which is there's a lot of pieces of a message there, but the movie doesn't actually connect them very well. And so if you're kind of in a frame of mind to draw those lines and connect those dots on the movie's behalf, then you could come away with a message. But if you're actually trying to find that specific message in the, within the actual movie, it's harder.
Yeah,
so,
I get what you're saying. I think ultimately what you're supposed to be left with is that, if you grow up right, you're going to end up as the sum of the best parts of both your parents, which is what Hiccup ends up. And you need his mom to enter the picture so that you can see what her best strengths are.
Yeah.
So that at the end, when he is the summation of Stoic and his mom, and he is the best pieces of both of them, then he's a good guy, and that's what you're striving for.
Like I could see an element of this is an example of connecting some dots that I think the movie didn't actually connect in a very concrete way. But they could have made a bigger deal about the fact that his mom had this understanding of dragons, but then she also ran away and didn't do anything about it. And so, whereas, Stoic is the one that wants to charge in and take care of business, even if he maybe doesn't have a full understanding of the situation.
Right,
and
he's
so
the one
having the one be
first. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could see them do that, but then again, I think there's a little bit of a problem of them not quite knowing what to do with Hiccup's mom. Like, they didn't want to make her look too weak, and so I think they soft-pedaled the aspect of her that we're trying to say this is why it's better for Hiccup to be a blend of the two. You know what I mean?
Right. I agree. It didn't do it perfectly, but to his point, that is what you can come away with it, is that she wasn't perfect and Stoic wasn't perfect, but they both had very good attributes, and Hiccup has acclimated to both of their best attributes, which is what makes him a good person, and that's what we're all striving for. If you grow up properly, that's what should happen. Your mom isn't perfect, your dad isn't perfect, you're not going to be perfect, but you're going to be better if you take the best parts of your dad and the best parts of your mom.
Right.
No, it doesn't drive that home, and yes, it soft pedals some of it, but you couldn't walk away with that,
Yeah. So, like I said, I definitely want to, echo what I've said a couple of times because I do mean it. I don't think it's a bad movie by any stretch. I enjoyed it. I think that it had some issues that made me not enjoy it maybe as much as I might have. It's certainly not as much as I enjoyed the first one. I think the first one has the benefit of having a really clear statement that it's making and making it in a really effective way on a number of levels that complement each other.
Yeah.
You know,
you have an open mind, then
yeah,
you sometimes going into society is simply about isn't just about being a rebel. It's about being open to new ideas, and that connection better everybody. Yeah, the first one's easy.
yeah.
Oh, you reminded me when you're talking about all the things that didn't quite work. This was one that really bugged me. I don't feel like they were 100% true to the mechanism that the dragon and Hiccup are supposed to be together. Because Toothless, at one point, almost dies because they remove Hiccup from him.
Yeah.
And then later in the movie, pretty much can do whatever he wants without Hiccup.
Yeah, they cheated that quite a bit.
Cheated it badly, and it pissed me off because it was one of the best parts of the first movie was that neither of them works without the other, and that's what makes the great team is that they're incomplete without each other.
Right.
And
it kind of works if you're willing to grant the benefit of the doubt that Drago is able to manipulate the same mechanism that Hiccup does. But it makes no sense how he would know how to do that. Because there's no learning process of him having to figure it out. It's not like we see him watching Hiccup use it and intuit it. They just don't deal with it. Yeah. And they do cheat that. And I think kind of on that same level is and this gets back into what happens to Stoic, which is just all the characters are invincible until the plot requires them not to be. You know what I mean? It's like but like it's beautiful on a moment-to-moment basis. It really works. Like I think the voice acting is really good. The emotion within each scene is conveyed really well. There's a lot to like about it.
Yeah. Now I'm just all wound up because I almost tried to forget about that because I was watching the movie with my girlfriend who hadn't seen the first one and was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch this. I haven't seen the first one. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's going to explain everything you need to at the beginning. And then we start watching it, and then all of a sudden there's this whole scene where Toothless is like plummeting to his death and all that. And she's like, what? I don't understand what's happening. And I said, that's like my favorite part of the first movie, and they didn't explain it in this. And so I was almost frustrated that the movie didn't even give you the background because she had no idea. You could not tell from what happened why Toothless couldn't fly. And so I had to explain it to her watching it and say, no, that's the best part is they don't work, they're both injured and they only work when they're together. And then later in the movie, it doesn't matter. I feel like he flew another dragon at some point. I don't even remember. I just remember I was mad about it. Yeah.
Well, so Hiccup should be able to fly another dragon just because it would mostly fly on its own, and he could, guide it like any other rider does.
Yeah, yes, he can, but I like the fact that the point.
I'm totally on board. Like the whole idea of them complementing each other is great, and it is one of the best things of the first movie. And I really like that about it, and I agree. I wish this movie didn't cheat it as much as it does.
Especially since it was such a great part because Hiccup is the one that shot him down. Hiccup did that to him, and I think Toothless is the one that injured Hiccup also, right?
No, because he didn't lose his foot in the first one till the end. Like that's a denouement reveal. Is that in fighting this other giant dragon that they fight at the end of the first one?
That's right.
Yeah. So basically, Toothless. Hiccup makes a reference in this one. Is like you saved me. You weren't able to save all of me, but that makes up for me injuring your tail. Right. That's the and
we can still fly together because I can make your thing work with me. Yeah. That's right. Because he clicks in. That's the day. You're right. Okay. But either way, anyway, I'm done being pissed off about it. I already got over it once.
Yeah. Well, see, I think it speaks to things that are good about this movie that we would get so worked up about flaws in it. You know what I mean? If it was just a poor movie from start to finish, if it was just dumb and not well executed in any regard, we wouldn't care about any of this. We would just say, no, it was boring, or no, it was stupid, or whatever. But we're not saying that because it's not those things. It's just flawed, and in fact, being so good but flawed just draws our attention to those specific things that prevented it from being great, as opposed to, something that was just poorly conceived from start to finish.
Yep. And, I'll go out with saying I would absolutely, just like the first one, I would absolutely watch this movie again if it was on.
Yeah.
Watch it. I enjoyed the time I spent watching it. But as far as, like you said, you sort of hedged at it, but then you said but when you said that, not all movies have to have a clear point or change our lives. Sometimes they can just be entertaining.
Yeah.
But you're still always going to expect more out of this movie because it's there. It's ready for it if you just clear up some things and tighten it up, Yeah.
The movies don't have to do that, but I like it when they do.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lego movie, I think, does. I think the Lego movie it expresses well some things that I think are useful life lessons for real life.
Yeah, it takes something that's such a real feeling to us, which is, should you follow the directions or should you be creative and do your own thing? Mm-hmm. And most people do somewhere in between, and sometimes they follow the directions because that's fun, and sometimes after they're done with that, they take them apart and rebuild something else. But this draws these two extremes and really says this is one way you could be and this is one way you could be, and you know what? It's better to not just always follow the directions. Sometimes it's okay to just do your own thing and sort of stay within the parameters. And it even takes a little bit of stab at people who just do whatever with what his sister builds. Mm-hmm. It's not just meant to. Yes, you can do that and that's fun, but you know what? You're gonna have the most fun if you're kind of somewhere in between, where you follow the intention of what you're trying, of the directions, but you do it your own way, and that's a cool lesson. Also very relevant to Lego playing, Yeah.
So often the idea of being a conformist or being a free-thinking individual, they're set up as though they are polar opposites and there's no middle ground. When of course it's stupid to think that way, because of course there's middle ground, and in fact the best stuff in life is when you have a mixture of those two things, because you can have someone's great, incredible freewheeling imagination, but then you have a movie like this. You can't, one person can't make a movie like that. You need lots of people working together, and you can't have lots of people working together and produce something that's at all coherent if you don't
plan.
Yeah.
If you don't have some sort of direction and instruction. Yeah. And then you cap that off with an amazing hero arc of, with each, without even going into all the details, just the basic theme that, believing that you're the chosen one or the best at this is as important as actually being that. It's not about being touched by some ghost in something that says you're the chosen one. It's about believing that you can make a difference, and if you believe in yourself, but it tells it in a fun way. The story of if you believe in yourself, you can make things happen is not a new one, but this tells it in a new way, and I liked it.
Yeah, I like the idea that being special is not an accident of birth; it's a decision to do something special.
Yeah.
And so if you want to do something special, it's not just oh, well, you were unfortunate enough to have been born ordinary, therefore... No, that's not how it works. People who do special things decide to. Because you could have someone who's born with an extraordinary amount of talent, but if they're just kind of lazy and they don't put themselves out there, then they might not do anything special, even if they had a lot of potential. Alternately, you might have someone who's not, especially skilled in any particular way, but they make a decision to just go out there and do stuff, and they do stuff. And so I like that too. That the idea of being special is more of a decision than a state of being.
Yep. And it's funny, and it plays great homage to anyone who's ever touched a Lego. Mm-hmm. Especially those that played with it. Like, it covers the spectrum of, like, spaceship! The old yeah. Like, with the modern, like, all the super cool themed things. Like, there's a nostalgia to it. There's a great message. It's a ton of fun. It's absolutely hilarious. The song is kick-ass and a great part of the movie and part of the story. Yeah. I know we went from sort of transition, but I think we said what we needed to say about How to Train Your Dragon.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But we should talk about why we love the Lego Movie one last time, because it's not going to win. It's not even nominated.
Here's the difference when it comes to that for me is that I can say there's lots to like about How to Train Your Dragon, but there's lots of flaws. And when I think about the movie, I find my attention drawn to those flaws because they stand out amongst the rest of the movie. But when I talk about the Lego Movie, it's just this giddy examination of, remember this cool thing that happened? Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. Remember when he builds a couch and they fall in the water and they're in a floating couch?
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with the deeper message, but it's really funny.
Well, even that's an example of just like sometimes something that seems dumb at first might find a use somewhere.
Yeah. That's true. I guess it does have a deeper message.
Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, that's the Lego Movie, and that's How to Train Your Dragon too. What I did finish, like when I was having this discussion over Twitter with Jeff Haidt, and in fact, actually, our discussion was so interesting, he invited me to be on another podcast to talk about it more over there too, and I think maybe some other things. But I did also just leave it with what I said is, well, different stories resonate for different people, and I never want to tell anyone that they are wrong to like something. And his response was, that was the nicest "I think you are nuts" I have ever gotten.
Yeah.
But so
that they're wrong, but you're wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not liking doing it, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, like I can definitely say I think there are flaws and they inhibited my enjoyment. But if someone else didn't feel that way, I don't want them to not like it. But I can also have them not insist that I should like it.
Yep.
All right. So, speaking of which, Gone Girl. So ready to talk about Gone Girl now. So as previously indicated earlier in the podcast, we are going to talk all about spoilers. Because you have to on this movie, really.
I mean, the whole movie is spoiler after spoiler. Like,
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those kind of movies.
Yeah. So my capsule review for Gone Girl is that I think I admire many things about it. I think it's well made. Really, I don't even have any criticisms specifically at all, except that just when you get to the end of the day, I just didn't like it very much. It's not even really about, like, there's something that the movie did wrong.
Because at the end of the day, you realize you aren't really rooting for either character. You don't like either of them.
Right. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Yeah, see, it's one thing to say, like with How to Train Your Dragon, that I feel like the movie was going for something that I would really like better, but it just fell short. This one feels like it accomplished exactly what it was trying to do, but that thing that it was trying to do, I mean, it's not really fair to blame a movie for not being a different movie. You know what I mean? And so this movie just chose to tell a story that I didn't particularly like about characters that I didn't particularly like.
Yeah.
And it did so really well.
Yeah, it does a great job, and I'll say I enjoyed the ride because it was very suspenseful. It was very it holds its cards well. You know, you even until the very end, like, you never really get a full picture of exactly what's going on. Like, at the beginning, you know, obviously because of the way the plot is supposed to be set up, like, Ben Affleck looks like a really bad dude, and she looks really good. And then you start to realize she was pretty nasty and is really fucked up.
Yeah.
And you want to root for him, and he starts to come through as this little bit of a hero, and you're like, oh, that's a fun ride. And then you realize he's pretty fucked up too, and you don't like either of them. And he really is that shitty guy that they showed at the beginning. We just realize now she's also a shitty person, and they sort of deserve each other, but does that make a happy ending? Not really. It's kind of So I liked the ride I got taken on, but I can see exactly where you're coming from, because I didn't like either of them at the end. There's no protagonist in this.
Yeah.
You know? But I liked how it shifted who the protagonist was, only to end up on there is no protagonist, because it does a great job of she's the protagonist as the dead girl for a while, you know, and he's the antagonist who maybe killed her, and you know that's not all there is to it. And then all of a sudden, when you realize she's still alive, well, she still remains the protagonist for a little bit, until you realize that it wasn't just because he was actually really a bad person, and then he starts to elevate, and then this other character of Neil Patrick Harris comes in and elevates as, well, maybe this is the guy to root for, but no, he's actually a shitty person too. You know?
See, you know, it's funny, we'll maybe have a bigger discussion about him in just a minute. Because there are certainly chunks of the movie where it's leaning in the direction, and the presentation is to make us think that he's shitty, except that he also doesn't actually do anything shitty. He never forces himself on her. He's always deferential. He's clear what it is that he wants, but he never forces it. And we're only told secondhand what he did before in terms of the stalking behavior.
Which we don't necessarily believe, because she's a liar. I guess we're...
No, the movie definitely portrays him as also a creepy guy. No question. I thought it was interesting to think about what did he actually do.
Well, yeah, and then maybe that's what we can talk about him now, is that I thought, again, the movie is very skillful. Where I thought he was a bad person was in the way that he sort of imprisoned her without imprisoning her. Like, he had this weird way of how he got her, while always being polite, he ended up entrapping her in a place. It was... So no, he didn't chain her to the bed frame, but he did mentally, and it was really kind of creepy to watch.
Well, no question, the movie made him look super creepy. Like, I'm not disputing that in any way. It was more just sort of a mental exercise to say, other than the movie using the language of cinema to make him look creepy, what did he actually do that, in a broader sense, we would say is creepy? There's some things, but they always stop shy of him actually doing anything really wrong.
Yeah, but I think that's what I liked about why it made him feel so negative, is that, you know, the movie didn't excuse him from not actually doing something terrible.
The biggest creepy thing was that he wanted her to dye her hair back and stuff like that. To the implication that his concern was, the sooner I can have my Amy back. Like, the fact that she had dyed her hair to look different was a step away from perfection, and he needed her to take that step back. And so that was creepy. And then, of course, there's the double element of, like, oh, here's all the things that will make my house keep you safe, which, safe / safely under my control.
Right. That's the part I think was really the.
Oh yeah,
This,
no,
he's not a good, like he
no question,
imprisoned
yeah.
her without actually imprisoning her. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. But at the same time, again, like just as far as the thought experiment is concerned, the whole idea, the whole reason she came to him for help was to hide her because she feels like she's in trouble, she's in danger. And so him taking her to the house and showing her how secure it is.
When she had no money.
Yeah.
That's what really triggered it.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, yeah, she only went to him because she was desperate. But my point is, from his perspective and what she has asked him to do, you can make the case that he's just trying to show her that he is providing.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying it's all that.
But that's what makes him creepy is that he follows the letter of that while taking a little bit of the extracurricular to make sure that it's also clear that, she is imprisoned, and while he isn't going to force himself on her, she better eventually concede, or he might.
Yeah, there's an implication that he didn't get to that point, but he might have eventually.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly true. So there is definitely emotional manipulation going on. So I don't want to make it sound like this character is a saint and its movie tricked us. I was just, like I said, in terms of behavior that we see on screen, we see both Amy and Nick do way worse stuff than anything he does on screen.
No, but his arc is also a lot quicker, and that's why I thought it was interesting, because he's the super creepy guy that stalked her, and then he seems very genuine in his reasoning to help her out, when she calls him desperate, and you're starting to say, okay, these other two people kind of suck. Maybe this is going to be our hero, and then he very quickly turns into a weird creepy guy.
Mm-hmm.
You never even really buy into that.
It's the skill of the movie, though. That's kind of what I was getting at, is how much of our feeling that he was creepy is based on things that he was objectively doing that would be seen from the outside as creepy, and how much is the movie presenting him to us as a creepy guy. Like I said, that's where it's a thought experiment. I'm not really trying to defend the character as not a creepy guy. It's more just a matter of how much is the objective actions and how much is the movie using all of the camera angles and subtle music cues and dialogue choices and all of that sort of thing to present him as creepy.
Yeah, well, I would throw the not just the dialogue choices, but the acting. He plays impeccably a character that is objectively doing nothing, but is still giving a very off impression of what his end goal is.
He's very calculated, and kind of stilted, that the words coming out of his mouth are a secondary process. He's thinking one thing and saying what you want to hear.
Yep.
While he thinks something else. That he definitely gives that impression when you watch him.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you pointed out, I think probably the most phenomenal scene is when he's talking about the security cameras, and it's showing, and he's saying the words coming out of his mouth these are here for your protection, but the impression that we're left with, she's left with, is you can't leave. It's not really about your security. It's you've now put yourself in a position where I know you can't leave here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have you. And he doesn't say that, and he doesn't do anything that makes that the case.
Well, the demonstrating to her that he can. It's not only all these cameras, but that he can look through them from his phone.
Yeah.
So even though he's going to work, in theory, he could be watching her on those cameras at any moment.
Yes.
And that's why the one bit where she has to show on one of the cameras this whole setting him up as though he's been imprisoning her in a more concrete way, she specifically gets him distracted and then goes and does it immediately as he's driving to work so that she can be sure he wouldn't have been looking at the camera when she did it.
Yeah, she was very calculated.
Yeah. Well, like this is not even really a criticism of the movie as much as just an observation, because again it comes down to it's not really not really fair to blame a movie for just not being a different movie, right? And I think what the observation is that when we talk about Nick and Amy both being awful people, Nick is awful in a very ordinary way. You know what I mean? He's the guy who's kind of misogynist. He always kind of thought his life was going to be more impressive than it really is. He feels inadequate, and he takes that out in anger and getting kind of closed off, and all of those sorts of things, right? Like that's there's a million guys like that out there. Not all guys, obviously. I'm just saying it's common, I would think.
The movie gives him a little bit of a sociopathic edge that isn't in all guys.
But I just mean in comparison, though, to Amy, who is a suspense thriller movie character.
Right.
I just mean I have a hard time imagining anyone in real life that would do the things that Amy does.
No.
And that's not a fault of the movie. It's just an observation that of the two of them, he's relatively grounded in terms of being a real guy. You could imagine a real guy acting like that. Whereas she's really kind of a movie character doing all these really unique things that are hard to imagine really happening in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, but like you said, you can't fault the movie for being the movie. I mean, that's what that's what makes the movie good, is that she is doing these shocking things.
Well, right, that's exactly too why when we talk about the one nomination this movie gets is her as Best Actress, and not even Best Supporting Actress, but as Best Actress, because certainly true that up until it's revealed that she's still alive, we would start wondering, it's like, well, geez, how many flashbacks are we going to see before we realize that, oh no, she's actually much more prominent than that.
More prominent than you can imagine as you go through the movie.
Well, and she does. It is a great performance too, because kind of like Neil Patrick Harris's character, there's so often in the movie where her performance is called upon to be two things. One, a believable performance of one type to the other characters in the scene with her, while at the same time we can tell that it is a performance and that she really thinks something else, but without making it seem implausible in the scene that the other characters wouldn't see through her. That's difficult.
It is difficult. And she, and part of it's the movie and part of it's her, but there's one part I distinctly remember when I talk about how I enjoyed the ride of this movie, because it was definitely a emotional ride.
Yeah.
There's the part when we first realize she's alive and she's in the motel and she befriends this couple and they're playing miniature golf and she accidentally drops her money belt when she scores a hole-in-one or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, not really, that's not a thing, and then they go ahead and rob her afterwards. And the way you're feeling in that scene is conflicted, because you're not really sure what happened when she did this and she's still alive. You feel sorry for her that they did this, but you're not sure she's a good person and you should feel sorry for her yet. And then she goes and you realize, an hour later that she's a terrible person, and you're kind of like, wow, why did I even feel bad for her when she got robbed? Because, you just get this really conflicted feeling that you go through on this ride.
You know what it made me think of is Psycho, with Janet Leigh's character. Or is it Janet Leigh or Vivian Leigh? Janet Leigh in Psycho, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, don't, unless they know that movie well, might not even remember that her whole deal before she gets to the Bates Motel is that she's just stolen a lot of money from her business and that she's planning to go meet her boyfriend.
Yeah.
But so just that element of she's in trouble and there's tension in the story of like, oh, is she going to get caught by the cops? And the movie uses, again, like the language of cinema to have us be on her side and like, oh, is she going to get away with it? Is she going to be okay? But then we remember, wait a minute, she really should be caught by the police because she's an embezzler and a thief.
Yeah.
Grand larceny.
Yeah.
She didn't shoplift a candy bar here. She stole thousands of dollars from her employer. So anyway, that's what I was actually reminded of during that whole scene, of just that sense of finding yourself afraid for a character that when you take a step back you realize that they really kind of don't deserve your sympathy or empathy in that moment because they put themselves in that situation completely unnecessarily.
Right. And I thought, I mean, it was a fun ride because of that. So I ultimately left satisfied with the journey I went on while still not liking any of the characters.
Yeah. And I'm definitely glad that I watched it, if nothing else, just because it's a movie that provokes a lot of conversation, and now I'm able to participate in that conversation in a knowledgeable way. I'm able to have my own opinion about it, and I don't even. I think what I said before was that I didn't like it, and I think it's more like I didn't enjoy it. You know what I mean? I'm glad that I've seen it, but I just sort of, like, I don't regret seeing it. It's more just a matter of when it was over, I was kind of like, okay, well, that's done.
Yeah, and I see that. That's not how I felt. I left it saying that was a hell of a thriller because it did what a thriller should do. Is it took me on an emotional roller coaster and had me on the edge of my seat, guessing all the time, with no idea what was going to go on. And we've talked about this before, that sometimes movies tip their hand. This movie does not tip its hand.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely. It's interesting, I think. First of all, just because I think where it succeeds in that regard is that it just kind of has so many different reveals, many of which are kind of, I don't want this to sound like a criticism, but like some of them just kind of come out of nowhere. They're not based on something that, like you couldn't guess that it's going to happen because it's not really set up by anything that comes before it, or at least not so far in advance. Like, so for example, her getting robbed, we don't see that coming until she drops the money. You know what I mean? And it's until she slips up that way.
They didn't befriend her with the intention of robbing her.
Right. It's not until then that they decided to do it, and that's why, so it feels real, and there's a tension there because there's a definite sense of it's not fated to go wrong. It's going to go wrong because she slipped up. And that's what gives it that tension, I think. And that's why we can't predict it, because we can't predict when she's going to make a mistake. And so that sort of thing. I mean, there's implication, though, that there's implication later that they were suspicious of her even before that. Because she accuses her of faking her own, her face bruise. Which she had seen earlier. There was an earlier scene where they talked about that. But
so they were on guard, but yet we hadn't been tipped in.
They knew she was lying about something and didn't know what that might be.
Right.
But all the more reason that's what. And I think in some ways that almost was something like. It really seemed like the dynamic at this little motel was like there's nobody here who's not running from something. Like nobody would be here if they weren't in that situation. And so it was almost a bonding thing that she was hiding something. But then once they saw that opportunity, they realized, oh, the fact that she is clearly hiding from something probably means that she won't even be able to call the police on us.
Yeah. And they make a decision to do that. Well, that's what I said. I think what's interesting about it is the fact that Like things like that keep you guessing and make the movie not ever tip its hand, while at the same time all of it fits. You know, you don't look at a scene and say, well, that didn't make any sense with the rest of the story they're telling. You know, and that's a talent that movie has. Like, you know, we talked a lot about Neil Patrick Harris's character and how well what the movie set it up, and he didn't objectively do anything. Well, tell you what, the scene where she kills him is, you're like, what the fuck? I didn't see that coming. Like, but then you're like, but maybe I should have. Like, well, that actually makes sense.
It's a little bit like how the scene when she drops the money sets up the robbery. After the fact, you realize, but you don't necessarily guess that that's what's going to happen. And likewise, her when she sees, you know, gets him distracted, sees him off, and then goes and plays for the camera like she had just been raped. That sets us up that she, like, at that point, we're thinking she's setting him up for, it's like, oh, she's only just using him as an explanation for where she's been. But I didn't guess that she was going to kill him, although it's an element of assuming that she is willing to do it. It's a much better setup because he can't contradict her story.
Yeah.
But that's all just in the context of, well, but that's on the assumption that she is willing to kill somebody, on top of framing them for, you know, kidnapping and rape.
Right. And then you hit the final reveal, which is, you know, you're still sort of rooting for Ben Affleck to be the protagonist, even though you know he's not a perfect guy. And then the final reveal that they're back together because, like, he sort of needs this weirdness in his life because he's that fucked up, and you're just like, this is not what I thought how this movie would end. Not, and I don't mean from the beginning. Couldn't have predicted this. I couldn't have predicted this 10 minutes ago, but it makes sense that that's why this is what's happening, and that's why I can see what your feeling was, is that you didn't like how any of this happened, but I liked that every time it happened, you would say, shit, I didn't see that coming. It makes sense.
Right, and I can admire all of those things about the movie. It's definitely well made. It kept me engaged, no question about it. I really have no criticism for it at all, just beyond the matter of taste that I just didn't enjoy it very much. It wasn't a story that I felt needed to be told, or at least that I wanted to hear.
Totally fair.
But it is certainly well made, and if you know, and so again, it's well made. It set out what it intended to do, and then accomplished it. And so, good for that movie. I don't feel like I ever need to watch it again. I'm glad that I've seen it, so now I know what everybody's talking about.
Yep. So, all right. Well, that sums up Gone Girl.
Yeah. So, I might actually be able to see a couple more movies before the Oscar ceremony on Sunday, Sunday the 22nd. But I think, you know, we're not going to do another update between now and then. But we will be doing a show to just wrap up, you know, just cover the awards, and if we've seen any more movies between now and then, we'll talk about those too.
Yep.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for watching and or listening, and, you know, stay tuned on ChristianaEllis.com or my YouTube channel, and to see all the other stuff we've got going on.
It's like Survivor.
Yes, Survivor comes back on Wednesday, the 24th. No, the 25th. Yeah, Wednesday's the 25th. But Survivor returns. This is the, I think, Different Worlds or whatever it is, the blue collar versus white collar versus no collar.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so thanks, everybody, and, you know, we'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later.